Nuestro panel de hoy es sobre forecast. Como se ha dicho por ahí, es la bola de cristal sobre qué va a pasar. Y déjenme comentarles, para antes de empezar, que en la Universidad de los Andes, en Colombia, en conjunto con la CUNY Logistics University, nosotros tenemos en este momento en marcha un torneo de forecast de fletes de contenedores. Ya tenemos 2.500 respuestas. Estamos en la tercera ronda del torneo y pues vamos a ver si los que aciertan son seres humanos o es la inteligencia artificial. Pero ya tenemos una excelente muestra de expertos y no expertos, ¿sí?, que se atreven a decir qué es lo que va a pasar con los fletes en los próximos meses. Entonces, nuestro panel, voy a continuar en inglés. What is the forecast of maritime trade and flows of cargo? Let me make just an introduction about this subject. In 2025, global maritime trade is undergoing a structural transformation characterized by political uncertainty, fragmentation of alliances, and the consolidation of logistical players. And the new administration in the United States and the protectionist turn in commercial policy have likely accentuated the shift towards a new regionalism, is a question, redefining the global flows landscape. The reinstatements of tariffs on Chinese products, the revision of trade agreements between the States, Canada, Mexico, etc., and the proliferation of reciprocal measures by China and the European Union are placing a strain on the worldwide logistic network, disrupting maritime demand patterns. The same is happening with the measures by the USTR and the retaliation from China. The immediate effect has been a more erratic trade, increasingly sensitive to political cycles. As such, we are moving from stable globalization to intermittent globalization, where logistic planning must accept volatility as a structural condition of the business. The sector has experienced a period of slow globalization, has now faced a new structure of with a more evenly split between globalization and regionalism, with neither prevailing over the other. This volatility is evident in the phenomena such as inventory reconfigurations, businesses bringing forward purchases or diversifying sources, and in shipping routes experiencing unexpected congestion peaks, whilst others lose strategic relevance. We have also been affected by events of all kinds, which have acted as a meteor shower. A meteor shower, yeah? It's not only one meteor, it's a lot of meteors, yeah? Coming at the same time. That is a set of phenomena occurring almost simultaneously, such as extreme weather events, for instance, the one that impacted Panama due to the lower availability of water and the reduction of transits, or violent events such as the attacks on the Suez Canal and armed clashes in different regions of the world. Nevertheless, the political backdrop remains a decisive factor. The resurgence of protectionism, industrial subsidies granted by the States and Europe to strengthen their domestic supply chains, and the cumulative effects of conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East are producing an environment where forecasting is increasingly challenging. The Economist warns that maritime trade reflects the polarization of the global economy, closer, more expensive, and more uncertain. In essence, the situation is convulsed and affected by one or more meteorites, impacting simultaneously and creating a volatile environment that requires a clear and agile mindset to make decisions. These dynamics, multiple dynamics at the same time, are also reflected in freight rates, which accordingly to Drury, continue to show high variability following the pandemic rebound. Container freight charges now fluctuate not only with supply and demand, but also in response to geopolitical risk, port congestion, energy cost, etc. Then, let me, with this brief outlook, I invite our panelists to share their perspective on the future of maritime flows and the strategic implications our sector faces in this context of fragmentation and geo-economic adjustment. I suggest we begin with a general reflection on how each perceives the evolution of trade routes and the scope of the challenges. Let me make the first question to Mrs. Celia Espino de Marota. She is the Deputy Administrator and Chief Sustainability Officer of the Panama Canal. Ilia, as you prefer in Spanish or in English, my first question to you is how does the ACP, the Panama Canal Authority, anticipate that transit and cargo patterns will evolve over the next years, considering port infrastructure, investment decisions in the region, and the potential cargo relocation of some suppliers?
Good afternoon. Happy to be here and share a little bit with the perspective the Panama Canal has. We have seen, we did have a very difficult 2024, but in 2025 we see a surge. We had a 21% increase in transits due to the increase in slots that we had. We have seen markets like the LPG increase significantly, and our number one route, which is the US Gulf area to China with all of the energy products, has a big surge, except LNG. We have not seen the LNG trade come back. We have seen also dry bulk coming back after we increased the slots. And containers has also picked up. We might see a small drop in containers in the next year. We believe there's a little bit of accumulation on inventories in the US because of the uncertainty that you mentioned about the tariffs, what might come up. But other than that, we see a big surge in energy products and dry bulk. So we don't see a significant drop. Containers might be the one that might be impacted a little bit more. We have positioned a new way to transit the Panama Canal. We had the reservations, we have the auctions, and then we put the long-term allocation system for reservations to try to help our clients on the port congestion that they might perceive. So they are allowed to buy, we actually went from a 1-year slot, future transits, to 2 tranches of 6 months each. So that allows our clients also to be able to adapt a little bit to all the congestions that we're seeing and the uncertainties that have arisen in the last year and a half due to different factors. We also put out a net zero slot. We've had already 3 slots awarded per week to incentivize or to recognize those that are trying to reduce their emissions. So there's a plus there to recognize that trend to drop emissions. So we're looking at different areas, different agendas, and trying to provide to our customers what they will require, trying to keep a good draft for our clients. Lars, I remember a couple of years ago what you mentioned, and I keep it in mind. And when we make policy, we keep that in mind. So always listening to the industry is key for us to be able to adapt. That's why we went from the LOTSA 1.0 to a LOTSA 2.0, hearing all the feedback from the industry on what worked well and what could work better. So with that, Roberto Barceló, if you want to take on. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Um, Thank you very much. Very clear and very short. It's perfect. Then let me follow with Robert Barceló. He is a senior manager business development in Port Everglades. And let me ask you about how is Port Everglades assisting in facilitating trade with its prime trade partners?
Well, good morning. Our prime trade partners is Latin America. Port Everglades is extremely Latin American centric. Roughly about 80% of the trade going through our port is Latin America. Actually, when it comes to U.S. trade with Latin America, roughly 13.5% of U.S. commercial activity with Latin America flows through our port. So with all this talks of tariffs and all the uncertainty that's happening in the market or generated by us, if you will, not us as in the port, but us as a nation, we've been pretty well insulated from all the tariffs, including the USTR 301, the quote-unquote Chinese tariffs, because one of the concessions that were given during the final negotiation for the rule was the Caribbean was exempted from the USTR 301 tariffs, and roughly about 38% of our trade is the Caribbean. So that was a bit of a blessing. The second concession was we were granted a 2,000 nautical mile distance from South Florida or Florida ports. So trade with Central America, which is another big part of our LATAM book of cargo, will fall exempt to the USTR 301. So in street terms, we've dodged the bullet, if you will. We're seeing a lot of growth in South Florida as it relates to Latin America, simply because of all the nearshoring capacity or all the speculation of nearshoring that's taking place. There's a lot of interest in South Florida, obviously in the ports, but more so from a logistical standpoint. A lot of the warehousing that's being developed in South Florida, and let me preface that South Florida is one of the most challenging real estate markets right now. The average cost of an acre of land for commercial development in South Florida has exceeded $1 million. Yeah, exactly. So that's great for whoever, if you have a parcel of land in Dade or Broward, you're gonna do well. But that places a bit of a challenge to the small and medium-sized enterprises that call South Florida home. South Florida is very non-BCO, if you will. There's a lot of small and medium-sized logistics firms. Most of them, or a good chunk of them, are small, still, I call them mom and pop. Nothing wrong with a mom and pop, but there's a lot of family, second, third generation logistical operators in South Florida. Those guys don't have the capital to invest or expand. So you've got a lot of national, Bridge National, you've got Logis, a lot of these national, multinational companies that are coming in and buying up whatever land there is available at the port. The last parcel of privately held land at the port, 25 acres, sold a year ago for $27 million. So that's a challenge for the area to develop. The port has invested, and we keep on expanding our capacity. We're having, so far, the final tally for 24 is not in the book, but we're going to have a banner year. We're going to exceed 1.2 million TEUs. Not so bad for that little old port from South Florida. Everybody knows Miami, but Port Everglades, we're 45 kilometers north. We're the red-headed stepchild of South Florida ports. No one knows who we are, but we're there and we're competing. And we're also blessed with a lot of diversity. Whatever we don't handle in cargo, we'll handle. And I know that falls outside maritime trade, but yeah, passengers are maritime trade. We do about 5 million passengers a year in cruise, which is not too shabby either. We do petroleum as well. All of the petroleum that comes into South Florida comes in through Port Everglades. Actually, 11 counties in Florida get their petroleum through Port Everglades. Cement. So you know we're blessed, if you will, with diversity, which kind of helps deflect a lot of the uncertainty that's happening right now in the cargo market.
So, are you optimist for your forecast?
I'm always optimist. You've got to be optimist. If you wake up in the morning and think the world is going to fall apart, you're going to do your darnest to make sure it's going to fall apart. So you've got to be optimistic every morning. You know that old saying, you complain because you have no shoes, and then right next to you there's a guy with no feet. So you've got to be optimistic. And we're pretty, thankfully, geographically, we're very well placed, and we've made safe, smart investments to make sure that we keep on plugging along. Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic.
Good, great. Then following with Southeast Port in the United States, yeah? Ivan Mace is a general manager, container operations of the Port of Houston Authority. Then I don't know if you are optimistic or not, but let me ask a question. How is Port Houston managing these uncertainties, these current global market uncertainties, and especially associated to this is how is the impact of Port of Houston in your area, big area, yeah?
Good morning, and howdy, as we like to say from Texas. So I'm going to piggyback on the Port of Everglades. Port Houston, we're very optimistic. Part of that is we are very grateful where we are in the region for the U.S. You know, a lot of people like to talk about there's 2 coasts in the U.S., but they're wrong. There's 3, and we are on the 3rd one, which is the Gulf Coast. Part of the reason why we are very optimistic is because of the Houston Ship Channel. It is 52 miles long. We have 200 private terminals and 8 public terminals along that waterway. And as Port Houston, we are the strategic advocate for that waterway. We are the #1 port in the U.S. for waterborne tonnage. Last year alone, we did about 310 million tons. And out of that, containers, which is the part I'm very close to with our 2 container terminals, we did 4.25 million TEUs in Port of Houston. Now, how does that compare to the previous years? So in 2016, we did 2 million TEUs. So in 8 years, we doubled our throughput. So I'm about to date myself. When I started at the Port of Houston almost 20 years ago, we'd even hit 1 million. So in 20 years, we've gone from about 900,000 TEUs to 4.25 million. And we don't see that changing. And part of that is because of my fellow panelists up here, like I was talking to them before we started. Port Houston doesn't grow if their terminals don't grow. We are all very dependent and relying on each other. And a big part of that is especially the Panama Canal, which I got the privilege to actually see in person yesterday. And let me tell you, it's impressive. And we depend on it. So 30% of our trade comes from the Far East to Port Houston container terminals. 18% of that is Latin America. I mean, that's almost 50% of our trade. And all of that, a good portion of that is coming through the Panama Canal. So what are we doing with Port Houston to plan for the future? We can't just think 10 years ahead. We have to plan about 30 years ahead. The maritime industry, it's not going away. We as consumers, the world as consumers, is going to keep going, and it seems to be the most reliable and cheapest economic way to get freight to and from where it needs to go. So with that, the biggest initiative that we've taken in the past few years was something called Project 11. Some of y'all may have heard about it, some of y'all may have not. And what that is, it is the widening of the Houston Ship Channel. We worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in an unprecedented feat to get the capital and to get the project pushed as fast as we could. So we started talking about it in 2011. By the time we had the federal sign-off, we began dredging in 2022. It will be done through the 2 container terminals, Bayport and Barbers Cut, by the end of next year. What that does, that allows us to keep up with our competitors on bringing in larger vessels to the Houston Ship Channel. So, like I said, we have to look 30 years ahead. We already have Project 11, which is the widening of the ship channel from 535 feet to 700 feet wide. Now we have to look at the draft, deeper vessels, cargo. We need the draft. Right now, currently, the HSC is only dredged to 46 and a half feet. So the deepest draft vessel we can bring in is 45 foot deep. We need to do a lot deeper than that. So we're real smart down in Texas. Can you all imagine what we named the next project after Project 11? It's 12. So right now we're going to start the talks with the government and the local authorities to see what we can do to get the channel dredged down to 60 feet deep. Our other focus is, again, like I said, we've doubled our throughput in the last 8 years. So we're expecting to do the same in the next 8 to 10 years. So we are building out Bayport Container Terminal. She will be fully built in the year 2029 with a throughput of roughly about 4.5 to 5 million TEUs. And then Barbers Cut, our older facility that opened up in the early 70s, we are redoing her, bringing her more into the future in design layout to densify. And that will be finished also around 2029. And that's going to increase our capacity of that facility to about 2.5 TEUs. Well, the math doesn't add up. If we're going to double our throughput and eventually get to 8 million TEUs, our 2 facilities can only do about 7.5. So we are looking to the future what we do. Do we continue densifying or look to other areas?
Okay, thank you very much. Giovanni, it's your time. It's your Did you follow the optimistic wave towards you? Then, let me ask you, Giovanni Benedetti is the Chief Commercial Officer of the Grupo Puerto de Cartagena. How is the described global situation affecting matters, and what steps are being taken to adapt from your vision from Cartagena?
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. Well, I will start saying that volatility and uncertainty is the name of the game today. Despite of that, we are very optimistic. Actually, we plan to grow next year about 10%. So we'll be kind of like Houston. We should end this year with about 4.1 million TEU. We expect about 4.4 to 4.5 million TEUs for next year. So this is interesting because we are on a terminal market right now. There's a lot of scarce capacity in the region, so we are under a lot of pressure in many ways. Congestion is many times the word that we're seeing and hearing from our customers. Actually, we have turned down to receive new services in the past years, which we never did. So this is kind of a good problem now. A lot of challenges ahead. And if you ask me, yes, we're growing, but from where are we growing? We are basically a hub. And a hub, now that we saw, for example, the 50% tariff for Brazilian cargo, we actually saw many of that cargo coming from Brazil via Cartagena to US come to a downfall in a rapid pace. So this opens like a new way of thinking and trying to adapt to this new reality. We actually, for example, started saying, what is a berthing window? It's not arriving on time. It's arriving on time with the promised number of moves, with the promised crane split, because if you're having a problem and you're not arriving with 3,000 moves but with 6,000, you're actually out of window despite you arrived at the same time. So this has encouraged us to work with a lot of transparency, clarity with our main customers, basically Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, and CMA, and ZIM, and have a constant communication with them to address all of the issues that maritime shipping is having today. Because there's a lot of challenges going on. We see the problems in North Europe, we see the issues with Asia, we hope, Ilya, that we don't suffer from more droughts in the Panama Canal. Let's hope so.
Rio Indio's coming, Rio Indio's coming.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are many elements going around our industry today, and the best way to address all of these challenges and all of these big issues is to have very good communication, transparency, and open your books, because this is good for the industry. We cannot just take more than we want and we need, because then we'll be basically putting the knife on ourselves. And of course, and as my colleague from Houston was saying, the name of the game is to expand, to continue developing, which today is even harder because of environmental issues. So we're trying, and our next challenge is to add an additional 5 million TEU of capacity. But we wish it will be ready in 2 years, and we need to be realistic that this will take between 4 to 8 years. So a lot of challenges ahead, Ricardo, but good challenges, I will say.
Okay, and optimistic. Yeah. Okay, then, facing this optimism wave, let me introduce Mr. Henry Sima. I think it was a very good idea from TOC Americas to include your vision, yeah, about security, yeah, in the midst of these very high representatives of the industry, yeah. Then, Henry Zimmer is Associate Fellow of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Then, I think global trade and logistics are increasingly viewed through a geopolitical lens, especially from your side, yeah, in Washington. This can at times lead to political expedient, but factually incorrect assertions being made about port ownership and operations. Then, how can the industry better address and clarify misunderstandings when these arise?
Thank you so much for that question. Thank you. Buenos dias. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who may not know, CSIS, we're a Washington, D.C. based defense and security think tank, primarily looking at U.S. strategy and foreign policy around the world. And at CSIS, I am on the Americas program, and my portfolio includes port security, both the conventional security threats from smuggling, narco-trafficking, organized crime, but increasingly how ports are being viewed as sort of through a geopolitical lens, which, you know, I will be speaking, I think, hopefully trying to capture that view, the U.S. perspective, and then after I'm done with this talk, you all can check your phones and see if our president has tweeted something and proves me right or wrong. But I can't think of a better place to be answering this question that you pose than here in Panama, where, you know, as we all know, earlier this year, January 2025, President Trump announced that China was operating the Panama Canal, and that as a result, the United States needed to take it back. We can all look at each other and confirm, and I was down at the canal yesterday, I can confirm that that's not true. But I can also tell you that in those months after the president made this announcement and continued to repeat it, including at the State of the Union, we never received more interest from private sector, from the government, from other governments, and from the media, trying to make sense of what that meant and whether or not, you know, what the options the United States was considering. Everything from political pressure to would we see an earnest effort by the U.S. military presence in the region. And we were trying to make sense of that all too. I'm confident, I commend the government of President Molino and the Panama Canal and the government of Panama, real masterclass in addressing this volatility and getting to, in my opinion, a better position with the U.S. government. But I also want to say that this is not just rhetoric. One of the most important deals in the space right now, in the port and maritime space right now, between Hutchison and MSC and BlackRock was in many ways a direct consequence of this rhetoric and of this sort of politicization of the maritime industry. So we're seeing something that's based on, a misrepresentation at best and maybe disinformation at worst, still moving billion-dollar deals in the maritime sector. And so I'm glad to hear from the people on this panel that the outlook is still optimistic. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic because I don't see this politicization going anywhere anytime soon, because more recently, as we look out the window to the canal, we can see past that on the Caribbean side, a major US military buildup and escalating military risks. And we've been very fortunate in this region that it's been a zone of peace for a long time. But I think there's a real risk of some form of escalating conflict. And we've seen how conflict in other regions of the world, most notably the Red Sea, can really snarl supply chains and put a major dent in maritime traffic. So are we prepared? Is the industry prepared and thinking through what would happen if there is an escalation? Is it prepared for what would happen if there is conflict between, say, the United States and Venezuela? And I would pose those challenges maybe more as questions than answers. But I would say that it sort of only increases the importance of narratives, of being able to articulate clearly, not only to industry representatives, our usual context, but in local and international media, what's actually going on, to dispel or push back against maybe misleading narratives. It increases the relevance of port operators as well as vendors to be in touch with not only sort of maritime authorities, but increasingly foreign ministries and the people and governments who are making the case and who are articulating their country's strategy around the port and maritime sector. And I also think it increases the importance of red teaming and actually thinking through potential crisis scenarios, what can be done, what ports and operators can do to mitigate or respond in times of crisis, black swan events becoming increasingly likely, how we are dealing with that as an industry. So again, this is maybe more questions than answers for you, but I would say that returning to your analogy initially of the meteor shower that we're facing, that the industry is facing, the challenge in my opinion is discerning which of those meteors might be an asteroid that's bound to hit.
Thank you. Let me go to Eno, because the last vision of the port industry and Panama Canal, and security, and later to Lars. Then is a representative of the PSA, and that is a global terminal operator operating in 45 terminals around the world. Then my question for you is, which global trade do you see as being particularly dynamic in 2025, 2026?
Okay, thank you. Lars, I'm sorry, I don't know what we've done to Ricardo, but you'll be...
It's because he wants to make a joke that says last but not least.
Ah, good. You've stolen his thunder, yeah. Good morning, everybody. No, I mean, it's a broad topic overall, and pleased to be here to address some of the views that shape this year and the next years. I was actually not very optimistic in the beginning of 2025. Trump was elected in November and then took office around the turn of the year. And I didn't know what would happen. And then in April, I lost a quarter of my savings, so that was not a good start to the year either. But I think overall, what we're seeing is actually more positive than what I had been in the beginning of the year. Trade will not go away. And yes, multilateral alliances are reshuffling and reshaping, but I think we realize that trade is still the backbone of industrial production and decentralized production. There's labor arbitrage, there's energy arbitrage, there's production arbitrage, and the world is connected and will remain connected. And so trade will not go away. And I think we've seen that this year as a whole. Then there are tariffs, of course. We've talked about tariffs here on this panel, and we will talk about it more. Tariffs will change the way trade happens, but will not make trade go away. So, and at some point as well, I think the trades this year is talk of town. There will be a time when tariffs will go away again, or will take a different shape. So what will happen then? How will production go backwards, and what will stay? And I think some of the uncertainty that has been created by the current events will continue to stay. So the multilateral world that we are seeing right now between Russia, China, the US, Brazil, India, that I think will accompany us for a long time. Some of the multilateral institutions that we have relied upon for the last years will also be potentially weakened. So those are things we have to deal with. Back to PSA, last year, 24, we handled a record 100 million TUs, so we were very happy. This year we had a budget of about 105, and we also, that's what our outlook will be, 105 million TUs globally. So a 5% growth roughly. Next year we foresee 3 to 4% growth. So in general, good numbers. Trade is not falling off a cliff. But I would like to highlight, I think, some trades that are much more dynamic than others. We know the traditional transatlantic trade, the trans-Pacific trade, the Asia-Europe trade. Those are the traditional trade lanes that make up a bulk of the last 50 years of containerized trade. But I would like to highlight 3 different trade routes which see much stronger growth than what we have on average. One is intra-Asia trade. So the Asian countries have started to trade much more as a result of diversified and distributed production. But that has continued to grow. This year's intra-Asia growth was about 12%. So very sizable, new trade, new port pairs emerging, new locations for production emerging, new distribution emerging. So quite interesting. The second one is also not going away, is the trade between Asia and the Middle East. So India, Saudi Arabia, the sub-Saharan continent, is seeing huge changes. It used to be a region that didn't trade much, at least not containerized. India is going through the roof. I'm just coming back from Mumbai this weekend. India is the place to watch, 1.4 billion people, producing more, consuming more, and being part of the globalized supply chain, also as a response to China Plus One and China Plus X. And then same for Saudi Arabia. Previously very dependent on energy. That is changing quickly. It's not just oil exports, but it's all kinds of other refined goods and import as well. So Middle East is definitely a trade here to stay with significantly higher growth than the average globally. And the third one, closer to home, not surprising, is Asia to Latin America. Also about 10 to 12% growth overall this year. Beginning of the year, a lot of talk about Mexico, of course. We see the ports in Mexico being challenged by the volumes that are coming. But it's not just Mexico. It's actually many countries individually. And we always try to find a pattern because that makes it easy to predict the future. We couldn't really find much. Colombia, where we operate in the port of Buenaventura, is doing very, very well. You look at the macroeconomic situation, you'd be surprised by how strong trade is. Argentina, we operate the largest container terminal in Buenos Aires. Argentina is through the roof. And that is maybe the trade coming back. And so there's reasons for all of this. But I think overall, I'm much more optimistic about the next years than I was perhaps about this year. And the last word on PSA, we operate 7 terminals in the Americas, from the north in Canada and Halifax down to the south in Buenos Aires. And we continue to invest to ready our terminals, expand where we can, add cranes, add key length to handle the big ships, continue to stay relevant as ships get bigger, as volumes become more important, and as the requirements of our customers also increase. So we continue to invest and expand, and then there are large greenfield opportunities as well, but which also have been discussed, take much longer and are subject to all kinds of government decision-making and influence as well, but we continue to monitor those as well. So then, last but not least.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. you are the only guy from shipping line, then your opportunity. I have a question for you. In the same line, of course, how have you seen the global and America's cargo flow develop in 2025? And has there been impacts from the continuing tariff escalations?
Thank you. So firstly, let me just, since you didn't ask me if I was optimistic or pessimistic, let me perhaps start there, because obviously I'm optimistic that Ilya is promising a good draft in the canal, because that both me and my partners on the shipping side of the industry, we need that. I'm also optimistic because I have my feet and my shoes, so I learned that that's a positive. I'm slightly less optimistic when I hear Giovanni talking about his positive problems, because obviously positive problems on the container terminal side can very quickly be seen as a negative on the capacity operator on the ship side. So that's a bit of a concern. And I think overall, I'm certainly optimistic on the industry at large, but I think the part of the industry that I represent here today, so the shipping lines, I think we are looking at potentially at 26 that could be a challenge. But I think we can talk a bit about supply and demand and where that might be heading. But Ricardo, to your question on the trade and what we have seen, then I think the clear answer is that yes, the tariffs and the disruption have had an impact. Eno just spoke a bit about what PSA has seen on the volume development. And I can share that when I looked at some data for I just looked at the last 3 months and the full year, then it matches quite well with what Eno is saying, that intra-Asia, very strong. Also the exports out of Asia, also quite strong. The last 3 months has been around 7% growth year on year. But then the question, of course, is where does that trade go? And that's where, for our region, it becomes a little bit more of a muddy picture, because the imports into the Americas is a tale of two different worlds. In Latin America, very strong. I think the last 3 months, it's been around 12% growth year on year. And that matches well, of course, with Buenaventura, with Mexico, etc. But when I then look at my portfolio in North America, we are basically seeing no growth. The volume is basically flat. And the same goes for exports out of the US, also flat. And I think when we then try and overlay that with the geopolitical reality and tariffs, that actually matches quite well. Because the last piece in the puzzle, when you think about the Asian export growing quite strongly, is the fact that Europe has actually increased imports by around 9% in the last 3 months. So clearly, the growth is there, and this is what makes me optimistic on behalf of the overall industry, because trade is resilient, it'll continue, but very clearly flows will change. And for those of us who sits on the vessel operator side, we certainly have to be agile to flow with that.
Thank you very much. I personally feel that it is a very good panel. Really very, very excellent speeches about this hot matter. Yeah? Then I have a lot of questions for you, but not enough time. Then I feel that some of you have a question for the other panelists, but especially the audience. Yeah? If you can make a question, please raise your hand.
Ricardo, can
But
I
firstly,
address some of the issues that came on the panel? Definitely, we are looking at the opportunities in the future. And Lars, I can guarantee you the draft, because we're working in the Rio Indio project. So Giovanni, rest at peace that we will provide a bigger draft. Rio Indio project is a new reservoir, a new lake that we are working on in the Panama Canal. It's a project that started in January this year. And right now we're in the resettlement of some communities that will need to be relocated. It's 38 small communities, 550 families. So we're in that stage, and we're also working on the preliminary design to go out to bid in mid-26 with the construction of a new dam and create a new lake that will guarantee that we don't have another 2024 on our hands to be able to store more water for the canal. I'm really happy that Evan and Henry, you went to see the Panama Canal, and that is operated by Panamanians. And you should go see the Atlantic area, the Agua Clara locks, so you also see the new locks that were built by Panama. They were inaugurated in 2016, and more than 50% of the income of the Panama Canal comes from the new locks, where we can provide, when we have enough water, 50-foot draft. So, so very, very interesting subjects. As far as port congestion, we are also launching the possibility of going out to bid with 2 terminals, one in the Atlantic and one in the Pacific, run by the Panama Canal. The bids, it will be a concession, and we're going to have next week kind of a outreach to the industry to see how those 2 terminals will come into play, and to be able to increase our transshipment of merchandise through Panama. We're also looking at a pipeline for LPG for more energy products. So we're also optimistic with all the challenges we have ahead, and we can address all of everybody's problems here for now, except for Henry. That way we have to wait a few years. So,
Comments?
no,
Oh,
so that was
okay.
it. No, I just wanted to address a little bit of the topics that were discussed here.
Okay, Robert, some question. Evan, please feel free. And the audience, please, raise your hand.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, if you can.
Oh, no, I mean, nothing more to add. I mean, I'm glad everybody's optimistic. That sure as hell plays well. Any questions from the audience for me or any of you guys?
Yeah, go ahead. Your name, please.
Yes, Marvin Concepcion from Inter-American University. Marvin Concepcion from Inter-American University. This question is for Ms. Spino. Ms. Spino, thank you for detailing the current incentive. My question builds on that. As we race towards the 2030, and this is a little bit more on the forecast of fuels, how does the ACP plan to evolve this incentive to specifically accelerate the adoption of zero carbon fuels like green hydrogen or methanol, distinguishing them from existing lower carbon transition fuels?
Okay, we did our greenhouse inventory a year and a half ago to establish our metrics on going carbon zero by 2050, which is one of the targets and one of the challenges and disruptions that we've had recently. It's been a very disruptive year in many senses. But anyway, we're addressing our scope 1, 2, and 3. And scope 1, the Panama Canal has purchased 10 new hybrid tugs to reduce our emissions. We had an option of 10 more, so we're changing our tugboat fleet into hydric tubs, and we are also doing testing with biofuels. So that will help us on our tugboats, which is one of our highest emissions. We also awarded recently a new photovoltaic power plant, solar panels to eliminate part of the thermal energy that we produce. We have 2 hydro power generations, and we have a thermal. So we want to phase off the thermal. We have set some targets for 2030, 35, and 0 by 2050. We're also working on our fleet, electric cars, going to electric cars, and for the industry, like I mentioned, we just launched the net zero slot, where vessels that are fitted to go into greener fuels in the future get a weekly reservation. It's a small percentage of vessels that will opt for that. So we've already awarded 3 of those slots. But eventually, as the industry evolves, we will be adapting into that. We're working on 2 green corridors, one with MTCC and one with the Puerto de Algeciras in Spain. So looking at what are going to be the green fuels of the future, so Panama could become a green fuel hub. So right now we have the pipeline for the LPG, but eventually it could evolve into green energy, and then Panama could become a hub for green energy. So that's how we're looking at our decarbonization strategy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do
more
also
questions?
have a
Hello?
question.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello?
Good morning to everybody. My name is Beto from the Panama Canal. I have a question, more specifically to my friends in the ports. Have you seen any shift due to this tariff situation, especially from Asia? Have you seen any shift to alternative sources of cargo away from Asia, more into Latin America, more into South America? Giovanni talked about decrease in cargo from Brazil. Is that right?
That's right.
A
That's
decrease
right.
in cargo from Brazil to the U.S. So have you seen any shift? Because there might be a decrease in cargo from Brazil, but they are not going to stop buying whatever the merchandise was from Brazil. You know, have you seen any shift? And maybe Lars from the maritime industry, have you seen that shift coming, alternative sources to provide the customers with the merchandise they still require?
From Port Everglades, and then we've not seen any. There's been indications of a shift, but majority of the cargo that we get from an import is day-to-day items. A lot of perishable cargoes. We move on average 150,000 TEUs a year of fresh product coming out of Central America, the Caribbean, South America. That's not going to go anywhere. So, shifting from China, you're not going to. We're not in that space. Apparel, a lot of apparel is still coming through the port. There is some studies of shifting some of that manufacturing capacity from China into other countries. You've seen a lot into Vietnam. You're seeing a lot into India, Central America. Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica. Those guys have been in the apparel game for a long time. You might be some increases, but we've not seen any shift at this time.
Okay, I will say that when I talk about shift, these are short-term shifts. We're not talking about that this is definitive, So it's kind of the act of the moment, the stress of the hour, the stress of the tweet. So they typically stop for 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then, of course, it is impossible to relocate, to start resourcing from different places, near shoring, whatsoever. This will take time if it will really happen. So it's just really short, rapid actions in a small period of time. It's what we saw when Trump was running for election. All of the importers in the U.S. basically stocking up, piling up from Asia first, just waiting to see what was going to happen, But I don't get me wrong. I never meant to say that these are definitive shifts in trade patterns. It's only the heat of the moment, I will say.
And let me perhaps just end it that I think, yes, there are shifts. If we look close to home, then the intra-Americas trade, so Latin America, North America, and within the region, the last 3 months, the overall trade has basically been flat. I think we are at a growth of 0.2%. But if you then start diving in to what actually happens within East Coast, Latin America, and the US, that's down, and I guess one could speculate that tariffs have something to do with that between Brazil and the US. At the same time, if you look at what happened with very strong inflows to Mexico, perhaps those inflows had something to do with tariffs between China and the US, and cargo found another way in. And the last example that I can give is actually the intra-Asia trade that also Enno spoke to, that cargo then flows differently within Asia so that it can then flow from Asia to the rest of the world. So I think it's very clear the impact is there, and we are seeing things shifting. But also to Giovanni's point, they also shift back quite quickly when things change.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, please.
Hello?
Mike.
Hello. Good morning. Most of you have an optimistic forecast of growth in the future. Can you give me your opinion on how automation will play into that growth over the next 10 years?
Reactions? Eno?
maybe I'll just kick it off. So a very complicated question, has lots of angles to this, obviously. And it also depends where you are on the planet. So there are many places in many port cities where simply we don't have enough people. We can't find enough people to work the increasing volumes because people just simply want higher paid jobs than what the port or the maritime or the logistics industry can offer. So then what do? Either you stagnate or you look for ways to still meet the customer's demand and then introduce technology. That's right. Automation is always a word that we try to stay away from because it's not necessarily automating a whole process, but it's using technology so that you can move more containers or more cargo or more ships with the same amount of people, or you can accommodate higher growth. So one is labor shortage, is certainly a driver of looking for ways to use technology more efficiently. The other one is also wage cost increase. And so maybe not as much of a problem in Latin America as it is in North America and as it is in Europe, where simply, if wage cost continues to increase the way it has, it becomes very difficult to run the business that we operate, in many cases on high labor intensity and reduced margins. So it's also labor cost. And then the third one that I would like to add is, especially in Latin America, the more people are involved in the operations, the more the risk for safety and security is also quite obvious. So in Colombia, we try to use technology so that we can segregate man and machine for safety reasons, so fewer people, fewer accidents, but also the security aspect where people can have access to the terminal, have access to systems, have access to which containers go from which part of the yard to the other part. The more you can limit this and have a system drive it, or IT drive it, or automated cranes drive this, you actually it leads you to a better operation. So I would say it depends where you are on the globe.
Thank you.
You also have to add in labor. There's currently union leaders from the U.S. and Europe are meeting in Portugal to express their opinion or their opposition to automation at some of the terminals in Europe and in North America. So that is something to be kept front of mind of how labor and management interplay in the context of unions, which, as the ILA up in North America, the last strike that we had, thank God it was a short strike, but automation was a large part of how that was going to play out. So that's in my book, that's the wild card, if you will. Automation, AI, whatever sticker you want to put on it, it's great, but don't shortcut on the input of labor into the whole scheme.
Thank you. We have only one question from the audience. I don't know if, just a minute. Because I have an additional question to Lars and to Henry, but ladies first.
Thank you. And thank you very much to the speakers for such an interesting insights. I have a question for Lars, actually. I was reading about the Gemini concept that Maersk is using, and it's an interesting, I think it's a revolutionary concept for what we know as a traditional liner service. And I wanted to understand a bit more how this concept is going to help Maersk deal with the uncertainty that we have in the trade, and how that concept may impact the port volumes in the world because of the changing nature of it.
Yep. Thank you. Let me try and make it brief to not make it too detailed. But let me answer the last part first. So the impact on ports is that we are doing more transshipment than we did before, simply because we have separated the network into smaller networks that we then connect in transshipment hubs. So in short, we are doing more transshipment than we did before Gemini. So how does it help us to navigate the uncertainties? Well, it helps us quite significantly so, in the sense that we have separated again the network in smaller individual pieces. So if there's a disruption in one part of the world, we can then isolate that disruption to that part of the network, rather than a traditional network design where you basically send from one end of the world to the other, which means that in short, a disruption in China becomes a delay in Latin America. By separating it, we can then find ways to get the cargo into a transshipment hub and still arrive in Latin America on time. So in short, it's helping us quite a lot to navigate around the uncertainties. And I think proof is actually very much there right now. If you see all the weather events that has been in China this year, and the disruptions in Europe from strikes, we are still able to deliver a network that delivers 90% reliability, which is significantly above anything else in the industry today.
Thank you. Thank you. I have two additional questions because this is a really, again, a very good panel with a wide vision, yeah? But I have two doubts. Yeah? Firstly, when we thought about this matter forecast, yeah, is naturally related to the demand side, yeah? But we need to know about supply side. Then my question for Lars is this one, just a second. But the second question is for Henry, because security is, yeah, running, crossing all matters. Then for Lars, I want to reach a better understanding of the equation, supply-demand. Then from this point of view, how is your opinion about the fleet evolution, yeah, expectations? Please.
Yep. Thank you. And that is exactly the reason why my first answer in the panel was that I'm slightly less optimistic when I look at things from a shipping line perspective. And perhaps just a few data points for the audience here. The current containerized global fleet right now stands at around 33 million TEUs. That's sort of the overall number. But on top of that, the new book order, so how many new ships have already been contracted by carriers like Maersk, but also, of course, all our competitors, that number today actually stands at 10 million TEU of capacity. So we are looking at the next 3-4 years, there'll be 10 million TEUs of capacity added to the global fleet. And I mean, these are big numbers, but I think just a reflection that I had when I looked at these numbers, just the order book alone, the 10 million, that's a number that's higher than what the global containerized fleet was 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, there was not even 10 million TEUs of capacity. Now we are looking at adding that number to a fleet that's already record high. And on top of that, the scrapping and the idling of capacity, so basically what capacity is not being used, is essentially zero today. It's near on nothing. So all 33 million TEU of capacity is basically in use. And that, of course, puts the supply and demand equation potentially, at least not in favor of my side of the industry in the near-term future.
Okay, thank you. Henry, the United States, in this context, yeah, the States has dramatically intensified military operations in the Americas, but particularly in the Caribbean. Yeah? Then my question is, how are these operations complicating trade and logistics flows in the region? And does this intensified military presence represent a new normal? It's a new situation for the States, but for the entire hemisphere.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it's the new normal. And I think that that's something that maybe we're not pricing in at the moment is just how much the United States is reprioritizing the Americas under this administration. I've in all my years working on the region, we've never seen this level of focus brought to bear on the Western Hemisphere, and I think that's both a good and a challenging thing. Because it's obviously a challenge because increased military presence poses a number of complications. Most notably, I would say, something we've written on, is the fact that the United States doesn't have a lot of basing infrastructure in Latin America and the Caribbean, and so it's relying often on civilian ports to conduct resupply and manage operations. So there are some logistical demands. We've seen the Port of Ponce in Puerto Rico becoming increasingly important, relevant for the naval deployment that's operating there. We could see other ports facing similar demands from the United States, and that creates legal complications, it creates regulatory complications, it creates capacity complications. The second thing I would note is that as the US steps up strikes on narcotics smuggling, and I'll put on my organized crime hat for a moment, transnational criminal organizations are nothing if not adaptable. And so if these small boats that we've seen US strikes directed towards become more vulnerable, where are these groups going to pivot? They're going to pivot to trying to infiltrate, adulterate legitimate shipments with illicit cargoes. And so that's going to create a whole problem for port security, scanning, and customs infrastructure going forward. At the same time, I've been talking, I don't want to be too pessimistic. There are opportunities because this level of focus means that there's a lot more opportunities for countries and companies that are doing good work on port security to get more assistance and get more partnership. We've seen, in particular, I think Ecuador being kind of a winner in this situation, and the Noboa government being much more willing to partner with the United States on security issues, receive some assistance. I've also know that there have been operations stood up in Peru where we have a long-standing history of security cooperation. So there are chances that actually the industry emerges better and with more assistance and support than it's been getting from the United States recently. But it's a challenge of navigating, and it's a challenge of balancing, and it goes back to my initial comments about being able to frame the narrative appropriately and set the tone for the conversation in a positive direction.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes. But I have some concerns about climate change, sustainability, access to ports, especially with the recent experience in Panama with the low water level. What kind of, what are you thinking about, about this problem? But not only for the Panama Canal, but for instance, about the access to ports, and even, you are in a port that requires a deep channel, that requires maintenance and updating all time, ever, never. Then for you three, please, your reflections about the impact of climate change, plans. We need to be sure that the transit is good, the access to ports is good. Then please.
Yes. Like I mentioned, we had in the last decade the driest years in the Panama Canal, 2015, and we inaugurated an expanded canal with a draft of 43 feet, even though we have built locks that will allow in the future 55-foot draft, but the channels had not been dredged to 55. They're dredged to allow 50. 2019, we had another dry year where we improved on our operational efficiency on using less water to move ships than we ever did before. So we became very creative and innovative. We actually used the Panamax locks as if they were water-saving basins, and that allowed us to not impact shipping as much as 2023, which was the third driest year in the history of the Panama Canal. And that's when we defined two very significant projects, one that will be completed next year, which is a new water intake for one of our 8 potable water plants, because it's very important to bear in mind that the Panama Canal lakes provide water, potable water, for more than 2 million people. And we have 8 potable water plants. We have 2 more under construction and the increased capacity of one of them. So we see the trend is increasing, and we see a trend in dry years more recurrent. So we're changing the intake of one of our pipelines to a midpoint where it will allow us to use the water soy bases a lot more frequently than we can now because of the impact on water quality. And then we're doing the Rio Indio project to make sure that we have enough water to comply with both requirements the Panama Canal has, potable water and shipping. And we are at 80% capacity, so we still have about 2 to 3 transits per day that we could increase in the Neo-Panamax locks. And this new project will allow us to increase that capacity. And as far as the entrance channels, we keep doing the maintenance for, because, you know, Pacific entrance, you gotta go through the Panama Canal, so the ports benefit from that.
Okay, so for Port Houston, you know, I already covered that we're doing Project 11, the widening of the ship channel, and then the future is Project 12, the deepening. So that way we can match the draft of the Panama Canal and the ships that are coming through there. But another part that affects us within the very narrow Houston ship channel are 2 container terminal channels which run perpendicular to it, shoal in pretty bad. So every 2 years, we have to do maintenance dredging to contend with that shoaling. Currently, right now, the maintenance dredging will start November 1st. Unfortunately, we weren't quick enough. We went to a draft restriction at our container berths about 3 weeks ago. We thought we were ahead of it this time, but unfortunately, we were not. So now where we want to bring in 45-foot deep vessels, we're restricted to 43 feet right now. And when you're talking to a steamship line like Lars, that 2 feet is big for our customers. So we are trying to get into a routine and ahead of the game maintenance dredging for the channel itself. The other thing that Houston has to deal with is fog season. I was sitting here talking to Giovanni before this. Last year, we had 15 days that the Houston ship channel shut down due to fog. The year before that, it was 2 days. So it ebbs and flows. We're not sure what the outlook is on the fog season, but it usually runs in February, March, and a little bit of April in Houston. Now, what we've done to combat that and deal with port congestion is we implemented something that we call the VPSA. It is a virtual queuing system for our vessels. So for a vessel that's transiting the Panama Canal, we know it's a transit time of 72 hours from the canal to the Houston anchorage. So now when a ship is departing or either has its reservation for the canal, we will give it an estimated berthing time on that 72-hour time frame. If we have a queue at the pilot station, the ships will either choose to eco speed, saving money on fuel, or 2, do a rotation change of port. Where we are, usually they'll call Mobile, Alabama before they come to Houston. So that way we're keeping them hopefully on a close to their reliable schedule time instead of keeping them sitting out at anchor and not making money. Because if a ship's sitting idle, it's not making money, right? So that's kind of what we deal with in Houston and what we're trying to do to help our customers.
Thank you. Your last minute.
Yeah, just last, I mean, you have touched on the big things that need to be done and that impact us all. I just wanted to add one more thought that we, at our group level, we conduct climate resilience assessments, and these feed into port planning. So when we build new container terminals or when we buy new equipment, we look into the future, obviously. In addition to the effects that you've mentioned, I would like to mention 3 that are often forgotten but that impact our terminal operations quite a bit. One is rain, so heavy rain, monsoon, typhoons, these kind of situations. Maybe not so much in Latin America, but in other parts of the world. So this impacts how you design drainage, how you design stormwater protection, and so on and so on. So quite important, and 20 years ago we paid less attention to that. The other one is wind. So the amount of storms is increasing, and if you have equipment that can only handle up to certain wind speeds, you're obliged to shut down operations. So we build our cranes, or we buy more sturdy cranes. We buy different types of spreaders that can deal with this. So that's the second one, wind. And the third one is heat and sun. So the average temperature, as we all know, has increased, and the peaks of extreme heat have also increased. So what does this do to our employees, to our folks that are, operate in 25 degrees, 30 degrees, 35 degrees, 38 degrees in some parts of the world? So the procedures around managing heat and the impact on our operations and our people that operate in those conditions are also 3 things that we pay a lot of attention to.
Thank you very much. We are exactly on time. Then please, a great applause for these guys.